Here today, it might come to pass that I talk about the one and only, our beloved soul sister in the sky, Joe Rogan. He's a blessing to us all, and if only we could capture the brilliance of the mind of the one we call Joe Rogan, then maybe we can move on in society. So let me preface what I'm saying by saying the following, that I preface what I'm saying, which is a precursor. It's kind of like a disclaimer to what I'm saying about Joe Rogan. And it's a preface to what I'm saying about him. I saw one of his stand-up comedy specials, and from the year 2000 or so, and he made the point about respecting your elders. He was just saying that the phrase was kind of bullshit. Like, respect your elders. You don't need to respect your elders. It's the point he was making in the comedy special that I saw. It's like, you don't need to respect your elders. That's not necessary. It's not like your elders know more about the situation in your life than about your situation, your life. Respect your elders. Like, if you do carry out respect your elders, that's not going to apply very accurately to the specific situations that play out in your life. Respect your elders is to blanket that over stuff that you do. It would just be a superstitious way of living. Respect your elders as long as you carry that out. That's just kind of like a superstition, but elders are going to want to act as if it's more than a superstition, as if it's true to life. Like, you're always supposed to respect your elders. It's just something passed on by elders, but it speaks to a relationship that we have where we distance ourselves from respecting ourselves to make our own decisions. Respect your elders. You give responsibility to elders to tell you what to do, is the point that Joe Rogan was making. That wasn't my point. That was the point that Joe Rogan made. And so I want to use that point to be able to disrespect Joe Rogan, somebody who I guess I could consider to be an elder. But he's somebody, it's almost like everybody in the podcasting world, or people interested in podcasting, they would see Joe Rogan as an elder of sorts, seeing as that he's the person that revolutionized the industry, brought it to the forefront. There were people that had podcasts before him, but he's generally seen as the guy to revolutionize the industry. It's not like he's not deserving of that title. He basically is the father of podcasting, the forefather of podcasting. So he's like an elder to people who make podcasts. And Joe Rogan, he makes a podcast. He has one, and he has lots of science people on his podcast. Lots of science people. He has lots of mathematicians, whatever, like astrophysicists and marine biologists. Sure, he probably has a couple marine biologists, but he has futurists on his podcast. If you haven't seen it, he talks a lot about drugs and that he does them and whatever else. I think a big part of the influence he has is that we understand him to have taken all the heaviest drugs. He's gone the furthest as that you can go in taking the drugs. He's gone as far as you could go in the drug taking. He's taken DMT, which we understand to be the most hardcore hallucinogenic drug. And he's taken all the furthest hallucinogenic drugs and is sort of like the authority on them, seeing as that he's one of the few people who has a platform and is speaking on what happens when you're under the influence of something like DMT or LSD or mushrooms. And a lot of people read authority and influence into him for doing that. I think that's actually a really big part of why he has so much influence, is because we live in a time where people are trying to understand transcendence in something other than religion. People are interested in the transcendence of hallucinogenic drugs, is kind of the time that we're living in. And so somebody like Joe Rogan is seen as the authority on them. And so he gets a lot of influence and power besides that for whatever other reasons. But I think that's a reason that doesn't get enough credit as to why Joe Rogan has as much viewership as he does, is because we live in a time where people are interested in the hallucinogenic drugs worldview and what can, the transcendence that can come from taking hallucinogenic drugs, and what that will do for you. People believe in that, like that there's transcendence in it, that there's more beyond what this earth has to offer us if you take hallucinogenic drugs. And it's like Joe Rogan is our guide for that, seeing as that he took all of them. And so I think that this whole Joe Rogan thing only ends when we develop greater hallucinogenic drugs, which we will do at some point, like the LSD and DMTs of today. We're going to create more specified drugs into the future off of the like original roots, off of the original chemicals that compose an LSD or a DMT. Like we'll use those same chemicals and make more specified drugs that are derivatives of the originals, the same way that we take like a potato root and then make 40 different kinds of potatoes or whatever. We take like some original coffee bean root and then make a billion different kinds of coffee beans. Or you can just make different vegetables off of, like a tomato arose out of a cauliflower root or something. Like that's not a true example. I just don't know enough about it. I'm trying to make the point that a lot of the vegetables that we have today just came off, like different vegetables came off of the same original like potato root or something like that. But that's what we would do as long as the world is being more inundated with hallucinogenic drugs and people's use of them. They're going to develop more specified versions of it that have different effects on people than LSD, and then would cause people to have different worldviews. Like, because Joe Rogan's worldview is in part is created off of what he knows from taking like a DMT or an LSD, but like whatever it is, that whatever you receive from taking those, like that's part of his worldview, like that what he believes in, what he believes to be transcendent about life, or like that he thinks he can talk to aliens, or that you should view your connection to aliens in outer space as being connected to taking hallucinogenic drugs. Like that's part of his worldview. And I think like his influence only subsides when other people using different hallucinogenic drugs to give them different worldviews are speaking on those worldviews, and those worldviews are then more interesting. It's just that like it's just kind of hard, I'd say, in this current time period for people to find a more transcendent medium to like or to aspire towards than hallucinogenic drugs, honestly, because people believe that to be greater than ideas in the current time period. People believe that to be greater than like religious gods, honestly, like because we're trying to talk to aliens and that kind of thing. Allegedly, we're like, people are reading aliens to be God now. Like that's what people think. That's the character or the image or the kind of person that we're saying is like a god, is aliens at this point, because we're like, oh, it's aliens that are giving us direction in our life, that are out in the ether telling us what to do through things that they've given us on earth, like hallucinogenic drugs. That's what people believe. And that's what people believe. And who am I to discredit that? It's just kind of I think it's interesting, all the weed culture of things, and like the stigma that would develop around smoking weed, because like a stigma that would develop around it, like we make things like stoner comedy as a genre, because to read all these stereotypes into smoking weed. Like if you smoke weed, you have to talk really slow, or like you just have to laugh at stupid things, or you're just stupider and your mind is slower and you become stupider the more that you smoke it. And like that's a stigma that would develop around weed. But like the stigma kind of includes that we just see stoner comedy as a genre, like that it's not just regular comedy. Like things aren't just funny if you're smoking weed, they're like weed funny. There's a separation between society and then people who smoke weed. You see that with terms that develop, or ways, stereotypes that people use to describe people who smoke weed. And this whole like the whole Joe Rogan thing is like Joe Rogan, we're connected to outer space. Joe Rogan, like he's our connection to outer space. Like that seems to be what it is sometimes. It's like, how are we going to, because who else is going to be? Nobody else is the leading podcaster. Nobody else has the most futurists and whatever science people connected to outer space, people who are trying to go into outer space, and then Joe Rogan. Like, Joe Rogan's our connection to outer space. There's no, who else is going to be? And so it's kind of like Joe Rogan becomes a sort of savior figure to people, because who else is going to lead us out of the earth besides like the Joe Rogans or the Elon Musks of the world, as if like those are the only people that could arise, like Joe Rogan's the only kind of person that could arise. It's going to do that. And I'm just kind of interested in like, could somebody explain the connection between smoking weed and outer space? Because, or in the Joe Rogan, like, oh, we're all like, ooh, all the mysticism of going to outer space, and like all the creativity that comes from smoking weed to connect us to outer space, as if that's what happens when you do hallucinogenic drugs. Is like you're connected to outer space, as if you're not just in the world already, as if you're not like a million steps away from connecting to outer space, as if you don't have to take practical steps to go into outer space, like you don't have to develop technologies to do that or something. Oh, yep, we're pretty much in outer space at the point that you experiment with your imagination, all the mysticism of it, all the but like, yes, we built, and you see we build up this relationship to aliens as part of the Joe Rogan culture, part of the mantra or the attitude mentality of it. It's like this relationship to aliens where it's like, oh, we're gonna finally talk to the aliens. We see that aliens, there's a big spike in everybody talking about aliens, and like apparently in alien activity itself, according to like as related to the spike in everybody talking about it, the widespread discussion. Like, I think that aliens are real. I think that aliens are real. I believe in aliens. It would be illogical to speak on behalf of the entire universe and say that the entire rest of the universe is not. You can't just assume that it's not filled with aliens. I think it would be a better way of going about it to say that there are aliens rather than to say that there aren't, because to say that there aren't is just like you don't imagine that any other planet could possibly exist in the expanse of infinity. You think that Earth is the only one. I think that there's aliens. I believe in them. I think it's just funny that podcasters, like a lot of podcasters always have to have some sort of alien swag to show that they're a podcaster, to show that they're connected to being transcendent. Like, oh, aliens, they want to associate themselves with aliens. That's part of my identity, is just aliens, because I'm going out into outer space with me podcasting. That's part of what podcasting is. But like, that's just podcasting mentality brought on by Joe Rogan mentality, is like a connection to outer space through podcasting. That's how transcendent the medium is supposed to be. You're supposed to read it to be so transcendent that it's like you're getting to the point that we're just talking to aliens. We have a connection with them, and it's like practically speaking, unless aliens come down and say like, oh, we're here to help or connect you with the rest of the universe, which I guess they might do. This possibility you have to consider if you're somebody who believes in aliens. If they don't do that, there's still like a million of these practical steps that you have to take to go to aliens. There's like kind of a lot in the way of us getting to aliens. It could be really centuries away. It's not like we're really there now just because we started talking about aliens, or that's just going to come about. There's like practical steps that you have to take in order to meet aliens. It's just that people think that doing enough weed, smoking enough weed, doing enough hallucinogens will make it so that we're connected with aliens or whatever. Like, there isn't still this physical chasm between us and whatever the nearest alien is. Like, can you explain the process? Like, is that the next logical step, is that you smoke weed and then boom, aliens? Is that the next logical step? You smoke weed and then we are connected to outer space? Is that really, like, we connect that mentality to, like, could you explain how that works? How outer space is the same thing as doing hallucinogenic drugs? And could you explain how that works to me? And it's like all these people, all these podcasters that have to have some alien swag are like, they're ultimately trying to kiss up to Joe Rogan so they can make it on the Joe Rogan podcast. Like, they have to be part of that mentality. They will want to be associated with aliens the same way they want to be associated with Joe Rogan and associated with podcasts. That's an aesthetic, like the alien podcast, and it's just like, there's like, can't we do something else? Can we do something else? Do I have to listen to this mantra always? Isn't there somebody else can be like, I want somebody else to be the person that you want to go on their show, but like, I feel like at some point things transpire that that's not the case anymore. It's just like, it's hard to realize that any future would be one, that any other future would happen besides the one where Joe Rogan is the guy that everybody wants to get on his show. But it'll probably be that way for a while. It's not like it is like I'm complaining, but it's like whatever. Obviously, that's the way that it is. It's just that there's better things to be. There's better futures to understand. There's different eras in humanity besides the one that we're living in. I feel like in a time of a pandemic, we get more caught into thinking that the current times or the times far into the future, this is always the way it's going to be, and we're going to have to look to. It's like people act like we have to look to Joe Rogan to help us go into the future because he's the guy who knows, who has the most authority on the things that we deem to be transcendent at this moment. And so, like, that's transcendence. We have to understand transcendence, but like that we distance ourselves, you know. We try to distance ourselves from transcendence. Like, creativity isn't, like, I don't mean to trivialize it, say creativity and talent are big things, because they are big things to us right now. That's what we read transcendence into, is like mediums like that. And so we're always trying to connect ourselves to transcendence. It's just that the mediums, our explanations, our definitions, our language for transcendence is different at different times. We translate it into different languages based on the current time period. We use language specific to the time period, the same way that in different periods of war, different eras of humanity, we've translated the idea of weaponry into different weapons. Like, it used to just be your bare hands, and then at some point it was blunt objects, and that we translate the idea of attacking somebody with a weapon into all these different forms, these different definitions, and we eventually translate it into like swords and cutlery. We translate it into cutlery. We translate it into bows and arrows. Like, that's a way that you can attack somebody. But it is the same idea that you're getting at, which is attacking somebody with a weapon. It's just that that idea is translated into different definitions and different terms as time goes on. We do the same thing, and so then it was translated into machine guns at some point. And like that's like a machine gun is still an extension of you. It's like when you're using a weapon, it's an extension of you. And it's an extension of you that's a different translated version of a thing that you're using to attack somebody, but it's that same idea of attacking somebody. It's just translated into different languages over different eras of humanity. You do the same thing with transcendence. It's translated into different languages, and at this point, our transcendence languages are like creativity, Joe Rogan. It's like creativity, talent, whatever. That's what we think is transcendent. Aliens, like people are looking to aliens for, like, that's kind of like what God is to people. Like, that's what's going to guide us. That's what gives us direction. Is like the idea of talking to aliens. That's the way that we're describing it, is talking to God. This is what you're saying. It's like people are like saying talking to God or having some sort of transcendent direction or meaning in their life that goes beyond what they are, that they would have some meaning that they're trying to protect, or a direction that they have to go in life, that you would believe yourself to have a greater meaning than what you already know. Like, that's just transcendence. And we speak of transcendence in different ways over different eras of humanity. It's just that in one of the prevalent ones now is that it's aliens that are giving us guidance, and that's what we say that we're talking to. If we do a hallucinogenic drug that connects us to the things that we deem to be more transcendent, like creativity and talent, or creativity and like outer space, whatever. Is like outer space, is we understand outer space to be transcendent now, which is like something we didn't exactly recognize before, but it's something we've been recognizing over the last half century, especially since we've gone into outer space. We're building a relationship with outer space, which, like, outer space is physically, we already understand it's transcendent, because it's transcendent in the sense that it ascends around us in every single direction. It is transcendent physically in every direction, as outer space is the universe. And like like that is automatically transcendent, and now we understand. Now we're just getting wise to that. That's language that we can use for it, or is a direction we should aim our transcendence towards. It's like but it is what it is. As if you're just going to be able to talk to aliens when you start taking mushrooms or something, like, and that's practically what happens. As if it's not just something that as if it's not just an activity that you start doing. Like it's people's misunderstanding of things like mushrooms and LSD that cause them to say that it is absolutely transcendent, taking those drugs. Like, people act as if it's totally transcendent to the point that it's not just an activity you do, it is like beyond what you do. But that's just the message that Joe Rogan is selling you on. Like, that's just all this Joe Rogan thing, like this mysticism around, like, oh, how do you, like, connection to outer space? What if people are creative? What if people are talented? What if people are like, oh, it's like creativity. It's like you finally recognize creativity within yourself. You finally see yourself, who you finally are. As if like, well, it is also just an activity that you do too, that you take the drugs. It's just an activity. I'm not going to tell you it's not transcendent. Like it's not really magical. Like it's not, I'm just telling you the mentality of smoking weed is like, whoa, what's gonna happen? Whoa, we're all spaced out. Like that whole, we're spaced out for smoking weed. Oh, it's just like magical. We're just so connected with the universe. Oh, for doing hallucinogens. So connected to it. Like, I'm sure you feel way more connected with it than if you didn't take hallucinogens. It's just like that's kind of just one step in the process. It's not the ultimate thing. And Joe Rogan isn't the ultimate person to try to tell you about that, like as if LSD is as far as it goes. Like that's what a Joe Rogan or a Duncan Trussell is going to try to sell you on, is that LSD is as far as it goes, as if there aren't other drugs that are going to be developed that tell you different things and give you different states of consciousness. Like LSD, you're going to learn about that peace and love is the entire universe, and that you as a person have nothing to say because you should have ego death, and like that's the message of LSD, and that's the absolute message. It's just like they're touting a religion that's based around hallucinogenic drugs, what I'm telling you. And the more that you give power to the religion is the more that you discredit the practicality of making it into outer space, or understanding your imagination to be similar to the universe or something. Like it's not, it doesn't just happen that your imagination is the same thing as the universe, or like I'm saying that the capacity of your imagination to create different states of consciousness on different hallucinogenic drugs is the same as like infinite worlds that could appear in the universe. It doesn't just happen that you are connected to the universe in that way, that you can, like, that you understand lots of different states of consciousness just because you take hallucinogens. Like it's just an activity that you do that helps you learn about yourself, and isn't the ultimate activity. Like there's better things to do. There's better podcasters to be than Joe Rogan. Like I say this all for a generation of people. Like I say this all for people my age that are looking into a future of the next 30 years. Like, oh, do we just have to listen to Joe Rogan's worldview forever because he has the highest worldview possible? Because that's just like the current worldview is one that's based around transcendence being read into hallucinogenic drugs. And it's like there's better people to be. There's better things than that. It's just like, well, Joe Rogan, I think it's interesting that baby boomers don't, or Generation X, whatever one Joe Rogan is, whatever generation is above mine, they don't read into that Joe Rogan is like the cornerstone of, like, he's the dream of their ancestors. Like he's the cornerstone of a baby boomer Generation X mentality because he represents them. He represents them and tells you what's transcendent about life, and people believe transcendence like to be associated with his worldview, and like his heroes to be the actual heroes and whatever. Like he's a representative of the generation above mine, and he gives credit to the same heroes that the generation above mine would give credit to. Like I was watching him talk to Bob Saget, and I was interested to watch it because I am interested in Bob Saget as a person. I think he's talented and pretty funny, but like he's more interesting than just him being the character on Full House. And I was really into the interview that they were doing for about 10 minutes. And then past 10 minutes, I was like, okay, I couldn't possibly listen to this for any longer because it's nauseating, because they're just kissing each other's ass about how kind they are in life, how great they are, how emotionally supportive they are of each other, and how emotional each of them are. Like Bob Saget is just basically talking about that he's a delicate flower who gets emotional and cries about things. But he's on there to not disturb Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan's not going to disturb Bob Saget, and they're both going to give each other credit for being celebrities and being famous and like actually enjoying life. Like they're two people that actually get it right and understand they take responsibility for their lives and their place in life. Like that was the entire extent of the conversation, is what I realized after 10 minutes. This between Bob Saget and Joe Rogan is just they're both there to tell each other how great they are and how great they are for being actually kind people and whatever. Like there's no disagreement to be found in people, but like that would be a complaint that I have with the Joe Rogan podcast. It's like they all go, all the conversations go really well, like pretty much all of them, as if it's like entirely carefree, as if Joe Rogan doesn't have any dissenting opinion toward, like he acts like he has a dissenting opinion to his guests like 1% of the time, which isn't that much of a different take on things than a late night talk show host. If it's like really that carefree, like people should be arguing more with each other, because I think that people are just argumentative in real life. I mean, not practically they don't argue, but I'm just saying as far as emotional expenditure goes, people emotionally want to hurl insults at each other more than they lead on. Not that they actually do, but maybe we get to a point one day where people do hurl insults at each other. They finally let on that they don't like each other. Like people don't like each other as much as they say, and there's a lot of interviews that carry on Joe Rogan's podcast that are just people kissing up to Joe Rogan. Like I think Joe Rogan is a carefree guy, generally speaking, so he has no problem with like whatever, just having regular conversations or overlooking people that he doesn't like in the name of becoming more popular. But that's what you do to become more popular, is that you have to look carefree in lots of situations, be accepting of lots of opinions, so that you don't, if you show that you're disagreeable, especially when the culture wants to see that you're just a kind person that gets along with other people, like they're going to look for things that are wrong with you more easily if you reveal that you disagree with other people's opinions, or that you're a disagreeable person, or you're like unlikable in some way. You don't want to appear unlikable, hence you have a popular podcast. You trend toward popularity. The more likable you are, the more that you're just able to accept everybody's opinion and people on your show, and look over the things that they say that you don't like, because there's plenty of things that people that are guests on Joe Rogan's show say that Joe Rogan doesn't like, but he just overlooks it. He just carries on in a different line of conversation, or doesn't appear dislikable in any way when he hears things that he doesn't like. He tries but I guess that's like what you do as a host of a show. It's just that's actually not that much different from a late night talk show format if you are still trying to be a host and still trying to be popular and still trying to be likable. It's actually not, like, there's better things to be than that. You can have a podcast where you all shit on each other where you shit on each other more. I think that's a better thing than like that allows for more free dialogue and discussion, when people aren't trying to maintain level-headedness, maintain a save face type of dialogue with each other. If you're not trying to maintain save face dialogue, then you will be more free and open with your emotions, and you'll say things that are more true. I'm just saying that there are podcasts that can be more relatively truthful than a Joe Rogan podcast, where we're currently seeing a Joe Rogan podcast as like the most relatively truthful thing, like the most free and open thing possible. I'm just saying there are things that are more free and open than that, so you don't have to worry about the next 30 years us just having to listen to Joe Rogan. Like there's things that you can poke holes in with Joe Rogan, and that should be other people's job. That should be podcasters' job, is to tear other people down. People should try to tear down my podcast. Like that should be generally speaking, but it's like not necessarily. It's not like I would like that, but there's everything that you encounter in life is stuff that you don't like. People talk shit about you no matter what. People like, so you should just say what you want to, just like let people talk shit. You need to make sure that when people are talking shit about you, it's for you, that you relayed yourself the right way, so that they're talking shit about what you want them to talk shit about. Like you have to be don't be the person that like just make sure you allow yourself to people are just going to talk shit about you no matter what, so let them talk shit about the person that you actually are, is all that I'm saying with that. It's not like a Joe Rogan. It's not like you'd have any real complaints about Joe Rogan podcast. It's fine that they carry on carefree. It's just that, like the Bob Saget interview, you realize that it's kind of nauseating at some point when they're just trying to kiss up to him. But lots of podcasters wouldn't cross a Joe Rogan or wouldn't cross each other because they're all trying to kiss up to each other so that they can appear on each other's podcasts and be friends and make themselves more popular and more likable. It's just like, I'm saying that there's flaws in a podcast format as long as everybody's trying to kiss each other's ass, and the person whose ass we're trying to kiss the most as podcasters, including myself, is Joe Rogan. You don't want to make a Joe Rogan podcast where you shit on Joe Rogan at all, because like you're trying to be on his podcast one day. You don't want to say that you disagree with him or like be unlikable to him, because then he would have reason to not have you on his podcast, and he's the end all be all of podcasting. That's the ultimate goal for podcasters, to arrive on his podcast. And that's why the future looks so bleak sometimes, is that like who else could be the person that anybody wants to be on their podcast, when like Joe Rogan is that person now, and he's like a representative of a baby boomer and is going to say things alongside all the things that baby boomers, Generation X people say, ultimately, at least to some degree. And so that makes it so that people in my generation like might see it as difficult to see heroes in their generation rise up, or like because of the spell that's been cast over them by the generation above us, for all of us to think that the generation above us, their heroes are the actual heroes. Like this Bob Saget Joe Rogan interview, by 15 minutes in, I had already heard them talk about the tremendous unassailable, unpenetrable wonders of The Big Lebowski, and get this, Dana Carvey. How about Dana Carvey? Did you know Dana Carvey is one of the most talented people to ever walk the earth? He might be the most talented. He's the most talented person. Dana Carvey. Yeah, Dana Carvey's one of the most talented people. As if people haven't come along after him that are more talented. As if there aren't different mediums like music, that there's people like, there's, how many people are more talented? Like just that you would read talent into somebody who does impressions, or like that's one of the most talented people. It's like, well, he's actually more transcendent than other people with other talents, like in music or whatever, because he does lots of impressions. So he's one of the most talented people, and people don't realize it. What people don't realize, isn't that interesting? Even though everybody's heard this a million times, even though everybody knows that Dana Carvey is one of the most talented people, because it just keeps getting repeated over and over again, what people don't know is that Dana Carvey is one of the most talented people. That's what people don't know that. Yeah. Like, yeah, Joe Rogan and Bob Saget for saying that about Dana Carvey, having a 10-minute conversation about how fucking wonderful Dana Carvey is. Like, you guys are his friends for doing that, I'm sure. Yeah, you guys are you're really on his side to do that. I'm sure Dana Carvey loves to walk around having to deal with that he's one of the most talented people on earth, and having it be repeated back to him when he knows it's like he has talent alongside other people's talent. Like, people have come along that are more talented than Dana Carvey. Plenty. Like Fred Armisen is more talented than Dana Carvey. As far as people who do impressions, if you don't appreciate Portlandia, then whatever. Like that statement totally rubs you the wrong way. But Fred Armisen can do more characters than Dana Carvey, and do more accurate characters. He can do fully developed characters for lots of different characters. Like he can do impressions of all these different kinds of people that actually exist in the world. Dana Carvey does a lot of impressions that are generally accurate. Like, I feel like it's part of the knock on him. You already know that he doesn't do exact impressions. He just does a lot of them that are generally accurate. And so therefore he's one of the most talented people. But that's just like Generation X has been able to sell us on that for a long time, because of the spell that's been cast over the entire world by their generation, by the control that they have over the pop culture universe for a number of years that we're supposed to believe in. And it speaks to that my generation has a more ambiguous identity, that we don't see our heroes as being actual heroes, but we understand that heroes are supposed to be from the generation before us. Like, we have a much more difficult time declaring our heroes to be heroes, or we don't really see them that way, but it just speaks to an understanding that we have of life, that it doesn't matter that our heroes are what they are. It's like anybody's heroes are just what they are when you grow up. They're specific to the time period that you grew up in. And the generation above mine doesn't really understand that. They think that their heroes are the best and that they get to say that their heroes are the best, but maybe it's just that my generation doesn't care so much about heroes that they let the generation above mine carry on saying that Dana Carvey's like the most talented person. It's like Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson is the most transcendent talent ever. He was on a different plane than everybody else. Michael Jackson was on a different plane than everybody else, but like you're just automatically supposed to assume that and understand that. You're automatically supposed to agree with that Dana Carvey was the most talented person ever. Like, I'm not going to say that Dana Carvey wasn't talented. It's just that, like, that's going to come back to hurt Dana Carvey at some point, because at some point it'll just be a meme that everybody's saying that he's the most talented, when it's like, look at him objectively. It's not like he's the most talented. There's people like Kyle Mooney is more talented than... I would say Kyle Mooney is more talented than Dana Carvey. Like, Kyle Mooney wrote a movie. Like, The Lonely Island is more talented than Dana Carvey in what their ability to write. Like, lots of people who are writers are more talented than him. Will Ferrell came after Dana Carvey, is more talented. You don't call Will Ferrell one of the most talented people, but Dana Carvey is. Like, people act as if Dana Carvey is more talented than Will Ferrell, because secretly what people don't know about him is he's the most talented person. Like, Will Ferrell's more talented, Kanye West is more talented, the list goes on and on. Like, there of people that came after him that are more talented than him, list goes on and on. And plenty of comedians, like Louis C.K. is more talented than Dana Carvey. I would say, like, Dave Chappelle is more talented. Like, everybody's more talented than Dana Carvey. It's just that there's this, you're supposed to read transcendence into people who are in SNL in the 90s based on what Generation X is trying to sell you on. And, like, Joe Rogan is part of that collective, part of that group of people that's just going to tell you that SNL in the 90s was the best decade for SNL. Is like some of the most talented people ever. It's not like there were plenty of really talented people in the 90s, SNL in the 90s. Yeah, it's just that, like, don't make it so that they're the most talented or the most transcendent. That's just a generational thing. That's just generational bullshit. That's just generational, like, Uncut Gems. That people would say that that's a great movie is just because of the kind of people that base their identity around people who were on SNL in the 90s, like Adam Sandler, and that want to make it, like, people... The only reason that Uncut Gems, that people say that it's a great movie, is because of all these people that love Adam Sandler and SNL in the 90s that can't live in a world where the rest of the world doesn't see Adam Sandler as a serious actor. There's all these people that need Adam Sandler to be seen as a serious actor so that everybody can understand his transcendence and all his talent. When it's like, Uncut Gems is a stupid movie. It's boring. Could you imagine watching that movie again? Could you imagine watching that movie a second time? It's a dumb movie. It's stupid. It's not interesting. There's no point to it. Like, are we supposed to say a movie is great nowadays just because 40 people are talking over each other at the same time in every scene? Oh, that's a great movie because they made the script so that everybody's talking over each other and nothing means anything. It's a stupid movie. It's not it's boring. The only reason it's great is because of the reasons that I said, because of this identity that people need to have about people from SNL in the 90s. Like, Norm Macdonald is the most talented, the most funny person from SNL in the 90s, in my opinion. Like, there's nothing... It would be hard to truly knock him, but it's just that stuff like that. It's just that stuff like that. But it's like Joe Rogan has... Yeah, he'll have limits to his worldview, like where he's saying that so Uncut Gems is a stupid movie. Adam Sandler's not a serious actor. It's just people need to live in a world where people think that he is a serious actor and can perform serious roles. So, like, oh wow, it came out that Adam Sandler's actually good at serious roles. When it's like, the role in the movie, he just kind of... Anybody could have done that. Besides that, like, it's just fuck Adam Sandler. He was funny. It's just, forget about it. Fuck Adam Sandler. I'm not allowed to say fuck Dana Carvey because everybody's supposed to agree that he's one of the greatest talents of all time. And Michael Jackson was a pedophile. And not, that's beside the point of that people make it so that he was on a different plane than everybody else. The reason that I don't like that Michael Jackson's on a different plane than everybody else, or we have just that we have any of these people that are like so talented, like Robin Williams, as if they're not just people, as if Michael Jackson or Robin Williams isn't just a person. Everybody has to make them out to be an alien. Elon Musk too. People have to make Elon Musk out to be an alien just because he's able to do things that other people aren't, just because he doesn't care about restrictions, like just because he goes out and does things, just because he doesn't spend all those hours, that everybody else spends where they're like, oh, what am I going to do today? Oh, I don't know. I guess I have a few hours. I'll just wait around and watch Netflix or whatever. I'll get my day started at 2 p.m. That's when I'll do my errands, whatever, when you have a free day. And then when you get home, just like, oh, what am I going to do today? And then you're just really exhausted from not having enough time to do things. Like when you have all these free hours that you're just sitting around and acting like your life is really busy. Like I know that people are really confused. Elon Musk is able to do everything that he does because he has like 4 companies that he's the CEO of at the same time. But he just does things constantly without thinking. He's not like, oh, what am I going to do? He just does what he was already going to do. And so he has time. Like apparently there is time to do that. Apparently there's time to be a CEO of a company. You see that Elon Musk is doing 4 of them, but then people say that, well, a person can't do that. He must be an alien of some kind. He is just like, we attribute him this giant amount of transcendence, act like he's not a person so that we don't have to approach that kind of thing ourselves, or say that any one of us has the ability to do that, or it's at least slightly common that you could do something similar, that you could do something transcendent. People don't want to approach transcendence, hence Michael Jackson is on a different plane than every one of us, because transcendence, because talent is stigmatized in that way. Like Michael Jackson has talent that nobody else has, and people who have talent are people who have talent, and if you don't have talent, then you don't have talent, because there's a stigma around it, because the borders around people who have talent is the walls of that are really high, and we want to make it that way, so we don't want to take responsibility to be talented or creative ourselves. Like Joe Rogan, I was watching a different one where Joe Rogan had Post Malone on, and it was interesting. Like that's one that probably people were tuning in, like general Joe Rogan haters, people who are in his comment sections all the time saying bullshit things that don't stick, that are meaningless insults that they've been doing for like 10 years over the Joe Rogan podcast. Like the Joe Rogan podcast, in the comments underneath it, there's always all these people like Joe, then whatever Joe Rogan said during the podcast, in quotations, Rogan, like Joe, strange times, Rogan, Joe, oh, it's all about your biology, Rogan, Joe, like, but they say these dumb insults to shit on him that are petty and stupid and like don't get anywhere. It's just people that are jealous or angry of Joe Rogan, don't have anything actually to say about him. But the comment sections are always filled with like, oh, you're wearing Joe Rogan, oh, it looks like you just wore pajamas today, or like you just look like your bald head in your pajamas, like did you even try, or whatever. They're making fun of his clothes or his look, and it's kind of petty and funny. I guess that's what YouTube comments are for. YouTube comment sections go up and down in terms of their relevancy. If you ask me, in terms of the relevancy, they go up and down. They go into in terms of the relevancy, sometimes YouTube comment sections are really on point, and then sometimes they're taken over by hipsters. You don't want to read any one of them. It's like across the board too. Sometimes YouTube comment sections are producing lots of good comments, but now at this point it's so static that any one video you could look at what the top comments are and they're pretty good. Like I wonder if it trends toward that comments are getting better, or if the YouTube comment section is dying, because I feel like that's a common complaint too, is that like, well, YouTube comment sections are dead, but it's the second that they're dead, they revive, and then you're like, oh, there are good comments. You can always find where the top comment is actually applicable. It is in a lot of cases. So the YouTube comment section is not dead, and when it is, it usually revives itself. It cycles back and forth, the YouTube comment section part of things, not just for Joe Rogan videos, for comment sections, YouTube comment sections on videos all across YouTube. They go up and down. I would say they cycle through being good or not good, and that's a matter of opinion. When I would think it was bad, other people would think it was good too. So it's just like a useful thing that people use, as long as you consider commenting to be a useful thing at all. But probably people who are tuning into the Joe Rogan Post Malone podcast episode just to shit on both of them because they're both people that people like to shit on a lot, and they were probably horrified to find out that it was actually good and the entire thing was entertaining. I didn't get through the entire thing, but it sounded like they were headed in the right direction with their conversation, that the entire thing would be entertaining just from the vibe that I got from it. It sounded like it went really well. And it was entertaining. They said a lot of good things, but in the beginning, I turned it off because they were talking about creativity, and it was annoying to me because they're talking about creativity in a way that's like the way that everybody talks about creativity nowadays. Like in the same way that we build up the characters like Michael Jackson or Pink Floyd, we build up these people that are meant to be really creative, and they are so creative. They're creative geniuses to the point that nobody can approach them, and they're like a transcendent creative genius. They're apart in their own little world, separate from everybody else, and they have to deal with that. And we put that title on them, and it's an absolute title that we give to them, and it's really just a stigma. It's a stigma. We stigmatize creativity. We stigmatize talent because the world can't approach talent. But that's just because the era that we've grown up in, like the era of the last 50 years, is so dependent on Hollywood or as like that kind of relationship to celebrity, that there's these transcendent people in the area of performance, and performance is just a term that's associated with talent. And like creativity is more a word that's associated with the writing or the producing side of it that's behind talent. And so I'd say that we're trending towards now propping up creativity more than we would prop up the word talent, because talent is more for a performer or the person who's in front on the stage, and creativity is more for the person behind the scenes. We're more interested in the person behind the scenes now, hence head managers and hence we know the names of defensive assistant coaches and offensive assistant coaches more and more now, because we care about the people behind the scenes. We care about the creative aspects of it, the people who got to create the thing, or like need to use their creativity in order to be successful, because we're interested in the people pulling the strings or whatever. We're interested more in that now. We're interested in the people who wrote the songs, and we're tearing down all the pop stars. Like we're tearing down a Katy Perry for not writing some of her songs or whatever, and we understand the names of the writers. Like there's this guy who wrote 1 million pop songs during the course of 2000 to 2015, like every one of Katy Perry's songs, every one of Britney Spears' popular songs, it's like written by one guy. What was his name? Something Martin or something. He has a really common name. Actually, let me look that up. You have to look up this video. Actually, I'll put a link to it in the YouTube in my podcast episode description. This guy who wrote all these songs, Backstreet Boys songs, he's just like, this one guy wrote all of them because he's the guy with the formula. Like the formula for it comes from him. He's one of the people in the music industry that has a formula, but he has a certain formula for music, for songs. Like he's a guy influencing what is popular about popular music for the last 20 years. Like he's the most influential guy, and people didn't even know his name until recently, and like people start to know his name more because YouTube makes it so that you figure out more about people behind the scenes because of the availability of it. So we're more interested in finding out who's creative. So I'd say that that's a term that we build up even more than something like talent, but we stigmatize both creativity and talent by saying that people who are creative are the people that are creative, and nobody, like, that's not in people already. Like, it's not in people already to be talented. But I turned off the Joe Rogan Post Malone episode because they started talking about creativity, and it annoyed me. Like, I just would prefer to do something other than listen to that for 3 hours in a row. It's not that like this part of it was so annoying. It's just that it's interesting the narrative that you are supposed to follow in society about creativity, that like all this about people who wrote songs and like the stories of them writing their songs, and that's what Joe Rogan and Post Malone started talking about. They just started talking about creativity, but in the same general terms that anybody uses, which are that like, wow, what is creativity? It's weird how just a thought comes into your brain and then you use it. It's just like hits you at some point and then you just know what to do. And Post Malone was like, yeah, it's like all of my songs they're like mistakes of some kind, which is like a new way of saying it. So that's not something I would have a problem with. Like he's saying all of his songs are mistakes or just happen one day, because people are interested in what's creative about something, but they don't see a creativity in themselves. They want to give that to other people, and they aspire to be like people who are creative but don't see it in themselves. You stigma, like, but so they're talking, it's just the discussion that they had on creativity is the same as everybody who's like, oh, you want to be, same as everybody who's like, wow, weed makes you more creative, or like, wow, you take the right drugs, or you take hallucinogens, it just makes you more creative, makes you more in touch with your consciousness and your imagination, and makes you more in touch with your consciousness. Like, I don't have a problem with hallucinogenic drugs. I'm sure it does all those things. I'm just saying, like, that's not the end all, that's not the ultimate thing. And as long as Joe Rogan has all the influence, that's a reflection of that society believes hallucinogens to be the ultimate thing, and there's better things for that. There's better people to be. It's not like we have to live in a future where it's always Joe Rogan telling us how life is supposed to be lived, and the heroes of Joe Rogan are our heroes or whatever. It's like, it doesn't actually exist that way. And so they're talking, the conversation they have about creativity is just the same, in line with all these people in the music industry that are famous, like Robin Thicke or whatever, Pharrell, and anybody who's writing songs, that they're like, wow, it just happened in the studio, it just clicked in the studio, we wrote this song in 5 minutes. All these stories about, we wrote the song in 5 minutes and 10 minutes just because the creativity hit us at the right moment, because we're so creative, because we are the creative people that, like, we're able to, like, this is where it happened right in the studio. Like, there's all these videos made about behind the scenes, like, it happened right in the studio. It started with this beat right here, and then it started, and then off of that we built it, and like that became the song. But it's just like an idea that popped in my head, and that's where we wrote it, right in the studio. It just all came together. Like the movie Pop Star, the parody of pop music, Pop Star, Never Stop Never Stopping by The Lonely Island, is kind of about that same thing. It mostly makes fun of the Justin Bieber live documentary, like the Justin Bieber documentary about Justin Bieber's life, because the Justin Bieber documentary is just about, it's entirely made just as propaganda for Justin Bieber, so you understand how talented that he is, that his place as being talented in your mind is secured along into the future, is what this movie is about, because the people who made the documentary understand that the country, the world as a whole, is trending towards reading importance into the creators of the music, and so they needed to paint Justin Bieber as somebody who wrote all of his music, so you understand, oh, it's like creative. Justin Bieber's in the studio with his incredible mind, his incredible thoughts, making all this music all on his own. Like, this is how it started, and he plays every single instrument. Like, he's so creative, it's amazing. Like, he's actually creative. That's all it is. It's just propaganda for you to understand that Justin Bieber is actually creative. It's not like he's not creative. It's just like he does have a team of a bunch of people helping him to write it. It's not just him, but that's what they're going to try to make it out to be, so that you understand it to be talented more so than that he's just a performer, because you have to be a writer now. You can't just be a performer now. And so they wanted to secure Justin Bieber's place in your minds as being really talented and transcendent far into the future, and you have to believe like he's capable of imagining whatever, and that his imagination is beyond comprehension. It's unlimited. He can do whatever he wants. He's totally creative. But like Pop Star, Never Stop Never Stopping is about that. It makes fun of people who say that kind of thing, and the song that the movie ends with is called Incredible Thoughts, and they're talking about, like, there's lines in the song like, my own mind blows my mind, and like, what if a garbage man was actually smart, like, because they have incredible thoughts that they came up with that they put into this song because they're amazing to create them. And it's all just like, the song is about, they make fun of people who think that they're incredible for having incredible thoughts. And it's just about making fun of people who think that that it's making fun of the stigma of creativity, the stigma of talent that people put on people who have talent. But it's one that you build up when you say, well, Michael Jackson was an alien. Actually, he wasn't a person to be able to be capable of being a really transcendent performer. He's more than that. And like, just people get into this discussion about creativity as if creativity is only from aliens, it's from God, it's from you being in touch with your imagination through hallucinogenic drugs, and like that's all about you being in touch with the consciousness that comes from you understanding how amazing your mind is for producing thoughts. Like, oh, how does it happen at all? Like, what's the point of that? What's the point of trying to figure out what it means to be creative when it's just people not wanting to approach creativity, that you always have to have all these discussions about it as if it's some sort of transcendent medium. It's just people don't approach creativity. You don't believe me? It's like, it's just at some point people will understand that creativity is within themselves, and it won't be this big thing that we build up to be as some amazing gift from above that you become creative or that you're talented. People understand that talent is for them at some point. It's just that we don't realize it's a revolution to people that they could be talented or be famous or they could be creative, and that's the entire relationship we've built towards performing over the last century through Hollywood, is the revelation to a bunch of people, like to a society, a number of generations that got wise to the fact that, well, talent is kind of within ourselves, isn't it? Creativity is within ourselves, and us first approaching that is by building up all these characters, stigmatizing these celebrities and these characters to have it, to make it so that we understand that it's true of some people, but that it's too transcendent for regular people to have it. But it's like the same thing as when ancient Greece had Greek gods, like ancient Rome had Roman gods of love and peace. It's because it's like something that they felt that they were subject to, that they were unable to understand within themselves. Like love hadn't widely integrated itself into society. Like you think that, like I know that the ancient Romans at that point didn't entirely buy into their Roman gods or whatever. They thought it was kind of just more of a general guidance that you could look to, rather than that they were like totally absolutely believed in them, but they still believed in the gods of love and peace and whatever. But you build up gods of love and peace and the sea because you feel like you're subject to them, because you have this superstitious relationship to them, and people don't see themselves as being able to take part in the sea or like having mastery over it, or like they have a superstitious relationship to the sea where they think that the sea is going to try to destroy them, rather than that they understand the sea to be under their mastery. Or like it's the same thing with love and peace, that they build up these gods for them. That you have a god of love is that society hasn't integrated love into itself. Like you think that ancient Rome had a lot of love and peace across all of its citizens? Like no, and part of that is because they hadn't mass integrated it into their society, because they felt in part that they were still subject to it. They didn't see love and peace to be within themselves, but society at some point did start to realize that. They integrated it into themselves to the point that we don't have to feel subject to love. We write a million songs about love because we all understand ourselves to be capable of falling in love or having a loving relationship. At some point, society sees it within themselves, and it's just like everybody understands that they can apply it to themselves, and everybody has an interpretation on it. And then at that point, we don't feel subject to it anymore. It's just that 2,000 years ago, we were doing that with love and peace, and currently, in this day and age, we're doing it with talent and creativity, where we have to build up gods for talent and creativity. Michael Jackson wasn't a person. He's the god of talent. That we're subject to. He's on a different plane. He's a god. You make him out to be a god when he's just a person. That's a stigma. You stigmatize talent is the same thing as not everybody realizing that it's within themselves. But he's a god of talent. Pink Floyd, listen to how long am I going to have to play along with this narrative that Pink Floyd was like, oh, they were just mentally confused about things, like the psychosis of Pink Floyd, that allowed them to be so creative because they're on a different plane than everybody else. That Roger Waters of Pink Floyd is just so transcendent, and the mental problems he has, the psychosis, the creativity, because you can only be so psychotic as to crazy. The more that you're a genius, the more crazy you are. He's just so crazy. He's the only person that could even arrive at a place where he could make as creative of music as Pink Floyd did. It's not like Pink Floyd obviously had great music. I don't mean to trivialize Pink Floyd, but okay, thank you. But okay, thanks for Pink Floyd. I'm glad that they were really transcendent. We need to stop making a god out of them so that we can move on with our lives. That they're like Pink Floyd, the amount of creativity, the outer space, our connection to outer space is through Pink Floyd, and the psychosis that's brought about through the creativity of the outer space, like the Joe Rogan mysticism mentality of it all, that's going to connect us through the weed, through our imaginations and the consciousness. It's just kind of it's just rhetorical. It's rhetorical, and it's the same kind of mentality. Just I'm talking in generalities, but I hope you understand the what is it? The aesthetic that I'm painting for you. It's just like an aesthetic. The Joe Rogan kind of mysticism is similar to the creativity is king, creativity is God, that we want to read into things with building up Pink Floyd to be what they were. Like the Dark Side of the Moon is the greatest creative project ever, and it'll be that forever. Like there's nothing, that's the whole thing, is that we can't, nobody here can do anything as good as Michael Jackson or as Pink Floyd, according to the generation above mine, because we're always less than them. But I guess that is the case just when you have a more abstract hero, or a hero that was older, that like you more archetypal, that everything else descends off of. Like a more archetypal hero is going to have more of the market share and is going to be one of the greatest. Like there's something to be said about Pink Floyd and Michael Jackson being the greatest in their fields, you know. Like it's not like that's not true. It's just that as long as you keep having to live with that creativity only belongs to the really creative people, like these people, then you don't have to approach it. You just know that like these people are on a different plane and they're basically like aliens. And as long as you say that, you totally discredit yourself from seeing yourself in them. Or the more that you do that is the more that you don't see yourself as related to them, or don't see those people just as people, or that like people are capable of talented things. Like there are levels of talent that people have within themselves. There's levels for potential of creativity. People are more creative than each other. It's not like everybody has an equal level. It's just that it's stigmatized when you don't get to read any sort of relativity into the situation, that people have relative levels of talent. That like if you don't see that people have relative levels of talent, but rather see it as that it's absolute, like you're on one side or the other, you're talented or you're not, then it's stigmatized. As long as that's happening, it continues to be stigmatized. But it's stigmatized as long as we have to build up these heroes about it, that you don't get to approach it, that anybody else that comes along isn't as talented. But it might just always be that way, that we'll like, or there just has to be new mediums that develop for different people to be the most archetypal hero of that. Like, but is that even possible? It's just like my generation doesn't deal with making heroes out of people, because we just disgrace our heroes right away, and hence memes, hence cancel culture. Like we shit on our heroes immediately. Like Inception was a great movie that came about during my generation, like in the throes of my generation. Inception is a great movie that we would all remember. It could point to like, oh, remember when Inception came out? But it really only took us like 4 or 5 years to shit on Inception and be like, okay, yeah, Inception, whatever. People like Interstellar, the same thing. We all agree that was a great movie, but nowadays only took us like 5 or 6 years, and we're like, oh yeah, let's shit on Interstellar. Interstellar's, that's stupid or whatever. Like it becomes a meme at some point. It just becomes a meme, and we shit on it because our generation can't deal with having heroes, can't deal with identifying through singular entities that everybody unites himself behind. We don't really do that with our heroes. We just shit on them, and therefore my generation has a more ambiguous identity. And I think the generations above mine don't like our generation for doing that, or just continue to act as if having lots of heroes is the only way to live, or like having lots of archetypal heroes that they make out to be gods, that make it so that they don't approach the things that those gods represent. Like I feel like my generation might be more in the business of trying to approach all categories, seeing all categories as equal, but that's just every generation that comes after the previous one probably does that to some degree. They break down previously archetypal gods and heroes, whatever, and find specifications within them. They articulate more specified definitions about the gods, or more like, so that they have their own gods that arrive as derivatives of the original gods. You know, generations just do that as time goes on. So like my generation would have gods in different ideas, like you would describe it in different ways, like somebody who is the father of memes, or like the father of podcasting. Like I guess it's kind of like Joe Rogan would become a god of podcasting for us at some point, or at some point that's like what he would be remembered as. It's just that that I have to stare into the future. Like it's upsetting to me that I'll have to listen to the next 30 years about the amazing impact of Joe Rogan. But like, it's whatever. You have to. That's what he deserves. That's what he got. Like, he deserves that. You take a risk for revolutionizing an entirely new medium. You take a risk for going into that when nobody else is doing it, when people don't understand what you're doing or see the value of it, and then all of a sudden you blow up to be the biggest thing. Like I understand the value of that, or why he deserves for us to talk about him, but it's just upsetting that, well, that's what the future is shaping up to look like. Like, we're gonna have to hear about how great his revolutionary exploits were, whatever. And yeah, but people definitely do that. They make it so that people just stigmatize talent, so that we're like talent, but they do that by applauding. It just shows that we're immature with our relationship to talent, that everybody has to applaud people who are talented, or like they're amazed at it. They want to distance themselves from it by complimenting endlessly people who are talented and building up the people who are more talented to be more talented. Like, it's not like the people who are more talented don't deserve more applause. It's just that shows the distance between regular people and the heroes. Is the amount of applause that they would get, is like, that's a distancing action, that you're like applauding somebody or complimenting somebody. It means that you don't ever see it in yourself. But I'm saying, like, the same way that at some point everybody found it within themselves to say that they have the capability of falling in love, we will at some point in society, maybe in 100 years, realize that talent and creativity don't actually mean anything. But we'll realize that at the point that everybody's allowed to apply an interpretation of it to themselves, rather than that they have to distance themselves from talent and creativity, and in the name of being modest, say that they don't have any of that, when it's just like, our relationship to it is that we all are interested in the fact that we do see it in ourselves, and we project it onto our heroes at this point in time, and at some point that projection will just be within ourselves. And then at that point we won't build talent and creativity up to be these big things, and we won't have this superstitious relationship to it as if it's like something that we can't be masters of, is all that it is. And so it's like, because we act like it means a really big thing to have talent, like it's a really big thing to be a creative person, like you're creative. And then what's funny about it, and what I'm making fun of in people who are known to be creative, is that they act like that they deserve absolute worship for that. Like, people act like it is amazing, the incredible thoughts, like that they have talent, that they can create something, that people are creative, so that people aren't creative. Yeah, I mean, you see the same thing in religious circles. We call God the creator. For Christians, we call God the creator, as if creator is only a term that applies to God, but like, God is the creator. That takes away from that people are able to see themselves as being creators, when all creativity comes from God. But like, that's just that's the most archetypal way that you can make creativity a God, is you say God is a creator. You say God is creator, when and creativity comes from him. You're not supposed to see creativity from you yourself isn't, as it will always be subpar to the gods of creativity. But like, that's just a relationship that you build up to creativity to make it so that you don't have to approach it, don't have to take responsibility for your own creativity, your own creative thoughts that come into your brain. And the more that you don't take responsibility for that, is the more that you're saying, like, other people are creative, I'm not. It's more that you're like, I don't care about what I am allowed to speak on, what I think to speak on. It's not important because I don't really get to speak. Creativity belongs to other people. I'm not responsible for that. Authority belongs to other people. It's like, it's a theme. It's a theme that I'm talking about. But like, so I told you, so if you don't understand what I'm saying fuck Joe Rogan, fuck Dana Carvey, fuck Pink Floyd, fuck Pink Floyd, fuck creativity, fuck Michael Jackson, fuck talent. Because fuck all of those things. Fuck our superstitious relationships to them. Fuck that we build up people to be more than people. Be a person. That's all. That's my message.